Hello, folks. This is Glen Mowrer, and we're going to do another episode of The Next Step, TV Santa Barbara, TVSB. This show is going to be aired on Channel 17 on cable systems in Santa Barbara, and those who have access to that cable network at hours that are programmed times that are preset. But if you can't get that, or you know that somebody's out of the area and wants to see the show, you can certainly Google it on YouTube or Ustream. Google The Next Step TVSB. Be sure you include the TVSB. You can find this show and other shows we've done in the past on subjects, some of them specific to the Santa Barbara community, some of them more international and national in scope. Today's show is going to be about a group called Common Ground, which is definitely have a local impact, Santa Barbara County impact at the widest, I think. A local group of people who are getting together and working on issues of concern to the homeless community and to the community in general about dealing with this population. Our first guest is Emily Allen. Emily is an attorney, and she's the managing attorney actually of the Homeless Legal Project of the Legal Aid Foundation. Is that right?
Yes, and Common Ground, I supervise the Common Ground Project.
And supervisor of the Common Ground Project, which I had next, but glad you helped me that.
Yeah.
And then we have two people with us today who are involved as outreach coordinators, David Hopkins and Stephen Gruver. I got that right?
Got it right.
Okay, good. And you folks are working in the field, so to speak.
Yeah.
Common Ground.
Kind of the foot patroller, they would say, the feet of the program.
Okay, so you're out there. Let's just back up before we get any further than that. Emily, why don't you tell me and the audience, number one, what is Common Ground, and what is its purpose, as succinctly as you can say?
Sure. So we really started with the 2013 point-in-time count and vulnerability survey, where that was the first time our county did a vulnerability survey, which is not just counting people, which HUD requires, but actually getting more in-depth information.
Yeah, let me make sure that the audience understands this. When you say counting people, you're not talking about just census. You're talking about counting homeless people.
People experiencing both street homelessness and living in shelters.
So it was an attempt to find out what the need was.
Yeah, and not just the need generally, which is important in deciding what kind of policy is needed in this county, but the need of specific people by name. I think that's a real theme of the work we do, is knowing people by name and what they need, to no longer be homeless, to have housing.
Maybe this is an inappropriate time to do this sort of sideways thing, but what you said there, I think, is of interest to many of the audience. The implication of that is that the population is quite stable.
Well, and because these vulnerability survey point-in-time counts only happen every other year, that would be a concern because the population does change. But we have outreach teams that that we've created that do year-round outreach, and we can do vulnerability surveys with people year-round because there are new people. There are people who become homeless who weren't homeless before, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Once you obtain this data using, I assume, people like Stephen and David.
And actually, I have to say, hundreds of volunteers. We had over 500 volunteers the first year we did it. The next two times we did it, close to 600 volunteers.
Before we get to that, I know you folks are deep immersed in this work.
Yeah.
People who are watching this really don't know what it is we're talking about yet. So what you're talking about is finding out where the homeless are, who they are, how vulnerable they are, in the sense of are they really at risk, or are they taking care of their lives pretty well, or
how long they've been homeless is a big indicator of likelihood of death.
So once you gather this information, what is the purpose of knowing this?
So the by name list is kept, right now it's kept by the City Housing Authority in a database.
City of Santa Barbara Housing Authority.
And that's going to change over to the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness eventually. But since 2013, the City Housing Authority has been a key partner in this. The list, twice a month, a group of people who work in housing, public health, mental health, social services, nonprofits, go through the list and look at by name, where is this person? Are we outreaching to this person? Has this person applied for all the housing they're eligible for? Are they connected to services? And if they're not, our teams try to engage them.
Is that where you folks come in?
Yeah. So we call it a term for its coordinated entry. So we have this one group where we know who's in our county on the streets and then who's the most vulnerable, and we try to work around that list of the most vulnerable.
I'll come again. I want to step back a moment.
Yeah.
When you say you have a list, and Emily said the professionals, if you will, study this to decide who's in need and whether they've been asked for, offered resources and all that. You go out and get these names. You both do. Do you know who it is you're looking for when you go out in the community and do these kind of outreaches?
Yeah, it's when we do the vulnerability index also, there's a section of where this person hangs out the most, or where we might be able to contact through a different person or organization and find that person. And we also get to see the people almost on a daily to weekly basis and building trust on when we're going out there. And the trust is one of the biggest things of helping out there, because of right now there is the lack of housing. So when we try and build somebody up to the level to get into housing, and it's just they're like, where's the housing? And
so,
people are skeptical, certainly.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to understand what is one would say, I'm being rhetorical here too.
Yeah, no worries.
But one would say that, wow, if there's somebody who's going to offer housing for the needy, the homeless population, you just have to go and say, here's housing, come over and get it, and they'll just flood there. What is the resistance? What is the problem in making those connections to getting people into programs? Do they have to qualify in some way?
I mean, the wait list for housing can be long, and there's the way it's set up in a lot of communities, and has been historically here, is if you can navigate the system on your own, you're probably going to be more likely to get the housing. But if you have physical, mental health conditions, substance use disorder issues, trying to do that on your own is going to be very hard. So just helping somebody get an ID, a birth certificate, fill out the forms for housing.
Excellent.
These are all the steps.
So actual paperwork, bureaucratic steps.
Exactly.
Do you guys do that?
Yep.
Yeah, with almost every client, and it's also like with the it gives the person empowerment of saying, hey, look, if you can do 50% of getting into a outpatient program if they have substance abuse or whatever, then it shows you're willing to try and improve, and we'll work with you on helping you do that.
So these efforts that you might engage in are more successful than if it was left to the individual, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you're supporting that effort.
Even we find that it's sometimes a complex system,
of course,
to navigate. Yeah.
Well, if I know there's a little resistance to the idea of just going into the community and begging people to participate, but there are, like I said, the resistance level is real. I know this from the work I used to do with the homeless. There's a huge resistance to the system, and I believe that the system will not really help me.
Yeah, and just a lot of ignorance too. I mean, a lot of people haven't done many of the applications that we do with them, or don't know how to get through the whole process, or have done half of it but didn't know they needed 6 months of bank statements and an ID and a social security card. And so we try to piece together all of those things for someone to kind of complete the process. We just walk alongside them.
And as simple as having an address for them to use, and being able to say, send the information, to my office, care of Emily Allen, so that, I get it and can assist them with it.
So legal aid is involved in as you say, your office. You work in legal aid, but you also have this other hat.
Yeah.
You're not really a lawyer in this particular hat, or are you?
Advocacy is a big piece of this, and even when I was in law school, I started going to general relief offices, and that was the project at my Public Interest Law Foundation, was helping people advocate for general relief, which is the lowest form of welfare, basically, for single individuals. And I found even then that having us there made a difference. And I remember as a first-year law student having a man, say to us, an older man, say, "Thank you, lawyers." And We were first-year law students.
I worked when I was going to the University of Southern California at Legal Aid in downtown Los Angeles, and they were doing the same thing back then, providing this type of process assistance.
So, legal aid, our offices in Santa Barbara County tend to focus on helping people with domestic violence restraining orders and landlord-tenant law, but benefits acquisition is another piece, that legal aids do, spend time on. So I've been going for quite a while doing project outreach visits to Casa Esperanza, which is now PATH, and the Salvation Army. So I meet with people and talk about.
So you're going to residences.
Yeah. It's open to people. Walk-ins also.
The places that you can find people who are likely to be homeless or close to it.
Yeah. So I'd been doing that work. Then the point in time vulnerability count happened in 2013, and we had so many volunteers who participated. A few of us said, how can we keep volunteers engaged year-round? And so that's when we started creating volunteer teams that were year-round teams.
Okay. There's two things I want to mention.
Yeah.
Let's go to that.
Sure.
The reason I invited you folks here is because I got one of those notices that you're recruiting for volunteers, and I got the impression that you recruit constantly. So tell us how often do you recruit? How many volunteers do you hope to obtain? How did you two get involved as volunteers? I assume you're volunteers now? No, you're no longer volunteers. Were you volunteers to start?
Volunteers, and I lived on the streets for 11 years prior, and had got off the streets and went back to college and got certified in drug and alcohol, and started volunteering with Common Ground in 2011, and met Stephen and a few more, and we just.
So you coordinate the volunteers, you two.
And they do outreach themselves. I mean, what we found is we need to mix our outreach efforts of volunteers and also, trained staff that can work with those volunteers.
Okay. How many volunteers at a given time? How are they trained?
Yeah.
What can they hope to experience if they decide to volunteer with you? What do you want from them?
So right now we're trying to get at least 24 new volunteers. We have at any given time about 40 to 50 volunteers who go out. We have outreach teams in the evening at Pershing Park and Alameda Park. We have morning outreaches on Milpas in the downtown area. We have a couple teams that go to supportive housing sites and work with newly housed people. And we offer an introduction to volunteer training. This one that's coming up is February 6th at 10 a.m. and people can, on our commongroundsb.org website, see when we're having trainings. We do that training, and we also have our volunteers trained in what's called mental health first aid, which is a day-long training considered a best practice.
Going across the screen are various email and other addresses, phone numbers that people can use. Now, this show may be on before February 6th or may not be. I'm not quite sure yet. But in any event, you do these trainings besides once. Quarterly or what?
At least 2 to 3 times a year. And, we sometimes will train someone in the field and then have them, do the official training.
So you would be one of the people that would help with the training?
Yeah, for sure. So when I first came on board with Common Ground, I was a volunteer coordinator, so working just with the volunteers doing trainings, helping recruit people. And so kind of our hope for volunteers is that we teach people just to walk alongside people. I mean, that's one of the biggest needs on the streets. And so teaching them to do that and developing the relationship, like Dave was saying, helps them to navigate the system. And so we want to teach them how to apply for housing, how to apply for Social Security, those types of things that just help with people on the streets.
What is the? If I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking about being a volunteer, and I see a email or a phone number, and I sit there and I think, I don't know. What are the kind of things that people are most nervous about if they're considering doing this volunteer work, and should they be? What kind of things that people cause people to hesitate?
Good question.
I think there's a lot of fear, and unfortunately, I think the homeless person that's sitting there is just in the same amount of fear as the person walking up. And we use icebreakers, we call them, like a pair of socks or a granola bar or whatever, and just to break the ice. And you know, the biggest thing I see in like people that I talk to is kind of like the big brothers, big sister type thing. Mm-hmm. If somebody can identify with just one person out there and try and help them along, and we can, that's where we can step in and provide the training of how to navigate that whole system and peer navigation and meeting the person where they're at instead of jumping in and saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's meeting them and saying, what do we need to do?
From our volunteers, I just want to say we do expect, it is a commitment, and we do ask people to commit for at least a year. If you're joining one of our teams, you're going out once a week with the team to do outreach, and it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours just to do the outreach. And then if you connect with somebody and you're helping them navigate, through services, that would be additional hours of volunteer work. So that is quite a commitment. We do, when people sign up with us and get on our email list, we let them know about volunteer opportunities that might be, for one day or, a shorter period of time. And then every other year in 2017 in January, we will do the point in time vulnerability survey again, where we need hundreds of volunteers. So
these are people going into the community at odd hours
yeah.
and finding populations that are otherwise not counted.
So, people can sign up for a variety of different types of, volunteer commitment, but the teams that we're recruiting for and would like to recruit 24 good volunteers for, it is the commitment.
Okay, so the things that people might be nervous about is the commitment that you just described. Yeah. So that's put out front real quickly. Yeah. Being out on the streets and confrontation with homeless people and confrontation. Is there a fear of violence or a fear of...
Yeah.
How real is that? How much concern should people have?
I definitely think so. So we worked with some youth groups and high schools and things like that, and that's always a difficult thing as we teach in our trainings that necessarily mental illness doesn't mean violence or something like that, but because when people are on the streets, everything's right out in front of you. You don't have a house to hide any of that. So people have a lot of fear and a lot of just misunderstanding also.
There's when I was taking my class, and I think it's still today a proven fact that only 1% of the homeless are schizophrenic to the limit of where they're talking to themselves and screaming up in the sky, and people see that and kind of automatically profile that whole thing, and it's. Yeah.
I will say, since 2013, we've never had anybody who's been injured in any way. We do train on safety though, and there are, there are boundaries and measures to take to be sure to be safe, and we work in teams, so we don't want people going off on their own.
So the group is. Yeah. Aware of this and tries to deal with it. I will say also that I worked with poverty people all my career. In the last 8 or 10 years doing volunteer work with the homeless for the Legal Project, and the violence is extremely, I realize that I'm a man and all that, but I never had an issue with violence, the threats of violence. And I think I just want the public to, but I understand there's a lot of people, so I wonder, there are people who are concerned about this. And I wanted to understand that you both and you all have a awareness of that and know how to educate and help people overcome or respond to that anxiety.
I think people are definitely concerned about that when we interact with them. We require all our teams to go out as a team, and we require anything that people are doing to do as with 2 people. We've never had any interaction of violence or things like that.
Good. So I got that part out of the way. Let's talk about the good stuff. What do people get out of this that is rewarding for them?
The biggest thing I see is when you see a glimmer of hope back in somebody's eyes, and just that twinkle of them looking at you saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm not alone anymore. That maybe this person's going to help me." So if you're going to volunteer and you see that glimmer in somebody's eyes, that's the paycheck, and you can go home and sleep at night, and you have that warm feeling that, you you helped somebody, and if you didn't help somebody, at least you tried.
And you gave them some respect.
Yeah.
What about you? What are the things that people get out of this that they should that are rewarding and makes it worthwhile?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and I always think that for me, my interaction with people on the streets was just culture changing too. Is that if you can relate to someone on the streets and work with them, I think you can work with almost any people group, because you get an opportunity. I mean, there's a huge difference. I mean, someone has lost everything maybe, or lost parents, lost family, has alcohol or drug addiction, chronic mental illness, and being able to just sit down next to someone, hand them a pair of socks, and be like, "Hey, I'm here with you," is such a huge cultural barrier that you're jumping through. And so I think as a volunteer, if you can relate, if you can learn to work with people on the streets, you can learn to work with almost anyone, and you learn patience.
So it's a good career experience, but it's also a personal, emotional experience.
Personal, and
When you give them that socks and they say thank you, that feels good.
I think the biggest thing that it's bigger probably than the socks or handing somebody money or coffee, whatever, but sitting down for 5 minutes and just giving them your attention, letting them your ear, and just being able to listen and letting somebody be able to talk and feel present with somebody.
Okay. Common Ground is 3 years old, you said?
2013.
2013.
So,
That'd be three.
Yeah.
About 3 years old.
Yeah.
And what has it accomplished?
Sure.
And what does it hope to accomplish? Does it intend to become a end to homelessness in Santa Barbara, or is simply a tool to help fight with that? Is it working with governmental agencies that maybe aren't doing much? Or well, tell us about what its purpose is and what you think it can become.
So we started with the teams that were entirely volunteer teams, and we've added, staff to that. And two of the teams, our Milpas and Downtown team, have gotten a little bit of attention because we're working with people in the business community. We're working with the Central Coast Collaborative on homelessness. And, I think some of those partnerships are not traditional, but they've been effective in, advocating for some of the policy change with elected officials. So, I think we're part of, trying some new and different outreach, and we're seeing success, and we're starting to see some of these teams replicate. Carpinteria is starting to get going. Goleta, Santa Maria, and Lompoc are all looking at
My next
doing this.
question. Thank you for segueing so nice in there.
Yeah.
You say you're the group is for the county of Santa Barbara. One of my complaints over the decades has been that outside of the city of Santa Barbara and the county to some degree, there's almost no other government agency in the county does much. Santa Maria, Lompoc had a couple of little efforts over the years. The worst offender, in my opinion, has always been Goleta, and to a degree Carpinteria. They don't put money into shelters. They don't put money into affordable housing. They don't do almost anything. The burden all gets put back on the steps of Santa Barbara, city of Santa Barbara, by and large, with a little bit from the county. Does this type of organization reach out into those communities and get them to participate? Is there something going on there?
Yeah. So the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness, which is the countywide entity that's been created to tackle the policy issues around homelessness, is looking at what we're doing in downtown and on Milpas especially. And we've been involved with some of the efforts in Carpinteria, starting to do outreach there on a regular basis. And in that group, I've seen them say, hey, we need housing for the people who have been living in Carpinteria, some of them, their whole lives, who aren't going to leave Carpinteria. And so, seeing some good county housing authority is there, looking at, trying to help meet that need. So, I do think that it is going to be countywide. The last point in time vulnerability survey showed some slight decreases of homelessness in Santa Barbara, but some increases in North County. And so, we're seeing, I know in Santa Maria, some of the demand on elected officials to address, the visible street homelessness there.
This is a non-governmental agency.
We are a nonprofit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Non-profit, non-governmental agency,
Yeah.
providing services and facilitating services.
Yeah.
But you're not an advocacy group, or
No,
are you?
I mean, to the extent that when people go out and volunteer, I think one of the benefits of volunteering is you see where the gaps are, and you see when you're advocating for a service when that service doesn't exist. So, we certainly do encourage people to educate themselves about homelessness. We share information, all the time on our Facebook page about some of the best practices around the country of communities that are really effectively seeing significant decreases in people experiencing homelessness. We do let people know about some of the advocacy opportunities, and I'd say that we do see the people who are out there getting to know people then feeling like it's important that they advocate for solutions like housing.
Great. We got about 2 minutes to go. Maybe each of you might want to give me 30 seconds about what. Make a pitch, Dave, to have people participate. Or tell them what they can get out of this that would make it better for them and for your community.
Better for yourself and your community. It's it's just like I said before, going out there and if you can just lend somebody your ear for 5 minutes and sit down, have a cup of coffee, or just ask them what's up for the day, what do they need. And
the opportunities just in Santa Barbara itself, you mentioned Carpinteria, Goleta. Yeah. How far out do you reach?
We have some volunteers who are doing outreach in Santa Maria and Lompoc also. We don't have paid staff right now who's doing outreach out there. But I'd say contact us if you live in any part of Santa Barbara County, because it started with volunteer teams, and volunteer teams can be created anywhere.
Yeah, come out February 6th, get trained, learn how to do what Dave and I do, and it's our community is only as strong as the least in our community, right? And so we have an opportunity to care for the least, and we have an opportunity to walk alongside people and see our community improve.
And if you can't, everybody, we can really use a donation, and it goes for a great cause of buying those socks or granola bars or whatever, just to break the ice and ask somebody what they need to get help.
The logo's on the screen. We're about to sign off. Thanks, Allie and Juanita in the back. cgvolunteers@gmail.com. Contact Common Ground, see if you can be a participant and do some good for the fellow human beings.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Undo your mics.